Welcome everyone. So just a quick little 10-minute session. What I'm going to be speaking about is just understanding how Power BI sort of fits into Azure Synapse. Now we're talking about the actual Power BI. You've obviously seen a lot of talks about the pros and cons of things like direct query. We're not going there. We're just talking about how to actually get it in and working, right? So obviously the things you've seen today are people have been speaking about Synapse can really do a couple of things. You know, we can ingest data, we can store it, we've got these compute engines, and then we can serve it. And that serving layer happens in a couple of ways, but one of the sort of most valuable ways is to actually present visual reports to users, right? So that's an important part of this analytics stack. So we're going to have a look at how that happens. Now, before we get started, there's a couple of things that we need to do first, right? So I'm assuming that you have a Synapse workspace going, right? So in order to get there, the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need a Power BI tenant, right? And this is important because Power BI is not actually an Azure service. It's part of the Office 365 cloud, okay? Which really means that you're going to have some other infrastructure in place. Now, thankfully, setting up a tenant can actually be really easy, including something called the ghost tenant. So even if your organization isn't using it, you can actually still use your organization account to log into Power BI and create this tenant. It just means that you've lost a lot of the admin functions. So somebody's going to need to take it over at some point, but you can do it that way. Once you've got the Power BI tenant going, we're going to need a Power BI license. Okay, and this again is a little bit different from the Azure world. Okay, so within Power BI, we license things either at a user level or at a capacity level. But as what you're going to be doing is creating content within service, you're definitely going to need a user license. So that can either be a Power BI Pro license, or it could be a what's called a premium per user license. Both of those will allow you to actually create content within Synapse itself. Once we've actually got a tenant and a license, we're going to need a workspace. Okay, now depending on the organization you're in, you may or may not be able to create a workspace. If not, speak to your Power BI administrator, because you're not going to be able to use your My Workspace, right? Your My Workspace is like your My Documents. We don't develop there, right? Okay, and then finally, once we've got the workspace going, we're going to need Power BI Desktop because we can't actually create the model inside of the Synapse Studio portal. So we're still going to have to break out to the desktop every now and then. Okay. So with that done, we're gonna, so that's pretty much the end of the slides. We're gonna go into demo. So what are we gonna do? First thing we're gonna do is gonna go and create a workspace. I'm just gonna show you some of the things that you might consider there. Then we're gonna go and create the Power BI linked service because it's not on by default. Then we're gonna go and create a Power BI data source. We're gonna use that data source to create a report, and then we're gonna push that report back into the service, and then we're going to update it from Synapse, right? So you can kind of see that integration. Then we'll come back and have a look at, just doing a little bit of a roundup. Okay, so what you can see is I've got my Power BI workspace. I'm going to go, or my Power BI portal. I'm going to come into the workspace, and to create a workspace, you simply click on Workspaces, create workspace. Really easy, and you're going to give it a name. So this is not a word I used to be able to spell, but I can do that now. So we've now gone and created the workspace name, and we can choose a couple of options here. This is especially relevant if you are going to be using a premium instance. Okay, so we can switch between a pro, the premium per user, or we could use the premium instances, or even embedded if we were doing that. I'm going to leave it as a premium per user, and I'm going to go and say save. Now, chances are you don't work in isolation. So when you create a workspace, you get access to that. You get added as into a role that we call an administrator. But again, the part of the point of Synapse is to enable teams to work together. So we actually need to then enable them. So we can go into access, and I've created a role called Data Toboggan. Data Toboggan dev team, and you would need to assign them a role. And that's not a great idea to make them admins, just not a great idea in general. They also can't be viewers because they're actually going to be creating content. So they could be either a member or contributor. There's a slight difference. We're not going to get into that right now, but we're going to go with adding them as members, and we can go. So now we have a workspace that's ready for our, for our Synapse integration. So I'm going to flip back into Synapse Studio, and here I have a little setup with the most basic sort of setup. I have a single view that I've created in exactly the same pattern that you've seen here today. It's basically just doing a little Synapse query over a CSV file. It's just got a couple of stock prices. Okay, so I'm going to go and enable the Power BI integration. So I'm going to click on Manage, and you can see on this linked services, okay, because that's what it is. It's an external service. Remember, it's not part of your Synapse solution. So we're going to bring it in, and I'm going to say new. Now you can see I have a backup one just in case, because live demos. All right. So we're going to say new demo, and we're going to search for Power BI. I'm going to select Power BI, and I'm going to get continue. We're going to again give it a name. Okay, so that's the just the data Toboggan demo workspace. You want this name to be descriptive, obviously. We can obviously put in a description for that workspace. We can then choose where it exists. So if you have access to multiple tenants, you could do that, and then we select the name. Now this is interesting. It's sorted by date of creation, so it's I know I'm going to go right and find it at the bottom, but you can also use that search feature, and we're going to go and say create. So this is going to go and create that link, but you're going to see it's going to give me a little warning here. It's going to say, I've got to publish that, right? Sort of like I have to do with everything else in Synapse. Okay, I've made that change. I really need to sort of commit that. Okay, so I'm going to go and publish that change, and I now have a workspace. Now, how do I access it? Well, I come to this Develop tab. So you would have had the, we would have seen scripts and all that, notebooks, workbooks before, but we've now got this new Power BI space. You can see I've got my two workspaces, obviously my backup one, but this is the one I've just created. So I'm going to go and open that, give it a refresh, and we're going to see here, we can see that there's nothing actually in here, right? So the first part of actually generating data is then creating a data set. Now, this doesn't have to be done this way. You can actually do this from Power BI itself, but this is a little handy way to get started, right? Okay, so if we're going to go say, click new Power BI data set, it's going to run us through a little wizard that's going to say, well, here's all the little sort of databases that I had available. I've got my little dummy database. I'm going to say US stocks, and it's going to create this Power BI dataset file, and I'm going to download that. Okay, so it's going to appear there, and I'm going to click open. And what this is going to do is it's essentially got a link through to my Synapse serverless database. Okay, so I could have just gone and grabbed the connection strings and put that in myself. I then need to authenticate. Now, obviously, we're going to be using Azure AD as well as its pass-through authentication. And that's kind of important because remember, if you are using something like a database credential, that database credential would need to have its identity to be able to pass through to your lake, and that's not going to happen unless you use something like a SaaS token. Okay, so we're going to go with the Microsoft account. We're just going to go and sign in. Select our accounts. Okay, and we're logged in and we're connected. Okay, so it's then going to bring up Power Query, and Power Query is really where we perform our transformations. We begin with selecting the table we want. It's a simple little fat table. I'm happy with it as is. Obviously, I could go and transform the data, perform whatever sort of data transformations I might need. I'm going to say load. And I'm going to choose a mode. Again, there's been that discussion about import versus direct query. I don't have a data set large enough to show you how bad a direct query could be, but I'm just going to stick with import mode anyway. And it's going to sort of go and connect. And you're going to see that we're going to see a version of our table in a sec. It takes a sec. You can see 502 records. I'm going to go and create a very simple little chart. So these are stock prices. So I downloaded two stocks, just Microsoft and Activision, which Microsoft are in the process of buying. So we can kind of see what happened to those stocks. Let's look at their closing prices. Okay, so this is by no means a fancy report. Let's go and add a little slicer just because we can. And the stock. So now I can choose to focus in on one of the two companies, or I can view them both, right? Okay, really simple little report, nothing fancy there. I'm then going to go and publish it up. Now, before I can publish, I have to save to your desktop. So I'm going to save it into that stocks import, and we're going to save it, and then we're going to publish it. Be aware that the name that you called it, the file system, is the name that it's going to appear in the service, so you probably want to give it a useful name. We then need to go find our new workspace. I'm going to go and find Data Toboggan, You see what I've done here. Okay, so this is why you don't switch tenants just before you sign in. So I was in a client. Power BI, as is most things, the switching between tenants can actually be pretty frustrating experience at times. But, okay, here we go. Let's try publish again. Now I should see my data toboggan workspace. I'm going to select that, and we're going to publish it up, and it's now sending it to the service, right? So I'm going to see it in two places. So I can actually come into the Power BI service. Okay, so I can come into my data toboggan, and I should be able to refresh that workspace, and I should see my report. Okay, I can see them there, but I'm also what I want to do is I want to see these things within Synapse, right? Because that's what we're trying to do here. So I can see my report after I do a refresh. Okay, I can see my new data set, okay, my stock imports, as well as I can see my report, and I can come into it and I can interact with that report. I can also make changes. So what this actually allows you to do is actually edit the report itself from within the portal. Okay, so if we wanted to, I can't think of a useful little change right now, but let's say we just turn these into bar charts for some reason. Not that that's the better graphic choice, but you can sort of do that, and then we can make those saves. So you can see that we can actually edit the report in the service, or within Power BI desktop, or within the Power BI service, right? Okay, so now we've got three places to actually modify reports. All right, so let's just head on back to the slides. Okay, so we've kind of given you a little sort of, let's call that a whirlwind tour of really a simple little functionality getting in there, but let's have a look at the pros and cons. So the big pro is really we're now creating reports in the same portal that we're doing everything else, right? So that single pane of glass kind of thing. So this is it's like a one-stop shop. The problem with it, right, is that I can't actually do everything within the portal. So I cannot actually make changes to the model. I can make changes to the visuals, and I can create new visuals. But I can't actually make changes to the models, including creating measures, right? I also can't manage things like the data sets and the workspaces. So you saw how I actually had to go into the service itself to create that workspace. I don't have any of those sort of management options either. I also can't, if I have to go and set the credentials. Now my credentials were already there, so that wasn't an issue for us. But I couldn't do that, and I couldn't do things like setting refresh schedules for import modes. And then finally, probably one of the bigger things is that Synapse gives us this lovely single environment that we can commit very easily to a single repo. Okay, that, however, is not going to be true for our PBX files. You're going to have to go and create your own separate sort of source control and deployment process. Now, thankfully, there are processes within Power BI and Azure DevOps to do that for you, but it's something you're going to have to do for yourself. It's not going to be as seamless as the rest of Synapse. All right, and that is the end of my talk. So thank you.